we can't help it. Because when we returned from Paris,
Hmm.
I was like 7 years old. And that's when the 1973 Yom Kippur War started. And I remember, we were painting our, the glass windows dark so that the planes can't see us when we turn on the lights. We filled the bathtub with water
Wow.
just in case power gets cut
Mm.
off or there was a fire. We would open the windows slightly so that when there is an attack, the windows don't break, but they actually open up. And we would congregate in the middle of the
Mm.
house and tell stories. And there's something that that happens when we experience something like this. You begin to think that this is kind of normal.
Welcome to Extraordinary Stories. I'm Forbes Shannon, and with me today, I have a guest with maybe one of the most extraordinary stories we've had yet. From his background in banking to his personal journey, I'm really excited to hear this story and to have all my listeners hear it here on Extraordinary Stories. Um, Bassel Hamwi, thank you for being
Thank you
here.
very much for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Bassel, I heard so many great things from my partner and the extraordinary founder, Aaron Bear, about you. Aaron nominated you to be on Extraordinary. How do you know Aaron?
So I have the privilege to belong to this group of leadership group of CEOs called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And we're 39,000 business leaders globally. And we wanted to host Aaron on a number of occasions. And then finally, we hosted him into a coaching subnetwork. So, an event for some of our members who are interested in coaching and leadership development. So we did that a few weeks ago, and he killed it. He was absolutely brilliant. I'm still fielding like a couple of emails every day from people saying, "Oh, can you get me an introduction? Can you give me his email again?" So he really had
Mhm.
a stellar, he had really a stellar performance with us, and we're really happy to be associated with him.
Mm, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Aaron was on cloud nine after speaking with you guys. And, you know, I think one thing that Aaron's always helped me with is the ability to think
Right.
bigger, whether it's about myself, about the rooms that I'm in, about the conversations I get to have, like this conversation with you. And you're a big thinking guy. So let's just maybe start
Sure.
there. You're in New York. Um, I think it took you some big thinking to kind of build the life you've had. W- Maybe tell us where you started.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're all somewhat prisoners of our geography, right? So I was born
Mm.
in Damascus, Syria, in 1760, no, in 1966. It's been a while, but I was born there and then moved very quickly because my father was diplomat, so we moved around a lot. Moved to Spain and France. I spent a lot of time in Europe. Then
Cool.
came back to Syria and moved to Pakistan, and then came to the U.S. for my university. And after the university, I
Mm.
worked for the World Bank, which also meant a lot of movement. So I worked with the World Bank globally and then moved to Cairo and then moved back to Syria and started the banking sector in Syria. And then wars and civil war and circumstances forced another move. So I moved to Beirut and then to Dubai and then back to the States. But I think I'm very privileged that I had the ability to move because a lot of people globally who are prisoners of their geography cannot move. Here in the States, we're lucky our passports can take us virtually anywhere. A lot of people
Yeah.
globally don't have that, they don't have that privilege or choice. But I feel like the life I've led is largely a product or byproduct of my circumstance, and I had to make decisions based on those circumstances. And for me, I've always loved being in the States. there is something about being here that I think is very special on so many levels. And the individuality of uh, Americans, of being in America, is just incredible. And I really enjoy being here for that reason, some other reasons as well.
Mm. I mean, so many different places. Um, Kind of an off the wall question, but which place had the best food?
Oh, that's a great question, actually. So, I gotta admit, there is nothing like Damascus, man. I got it. It is
Really?
so good. First of all, it's like a very Eastern country, right? And
Mm.
the culture is all based on being generous and on serving food and cooking food. And I don't know if probably a lot of your listeners know this, but Damascus is the oldest continuously inhabited capital in the world. It is over 5,000 years
Wow.
old. And you can imagine with
Wow.
that kind of capital, you had so many wars, you had so many, you know, sieges, right? You had so many
Mhm.
crises that people ended up learning how to cook really well and how to cook everything. So whatever you
Mhm.
decide to cook, you're like able to take all of the byproducts and make something out of them. So it's a very rich tradition, and I find it to be like the most amazing food. So Mediterranean food from the Arab world is probably my favorite food for any place that I have lived in. Now, having said that, I absolutely
Mm.
love the food in Tokyo. I think Tokyo has some of the best food in the world, right? I mean, it's just insanely good. And it has phenomenal Japanese food, obviously, but it also had great food from other parts of the world. So, culinary wise,
Yeah.
if you tell me, it's a toss up between Tokyo and Damascus, as odd as those may be.
No, I love it. I think culinary is a really good reflection of the, like, cultural norms in general. I mean, you said very generous, and, like, communal in Damascus. Did that kinda sum up what your life there while you were there?
Yeah, for the most part. So I was there for a period of 7 years between the ages of 7 and 14, and I loved
Cool.
being there during that time. Although it was a time of economic hardship, this is a time where communism was on the rise, and the brand of communism that the
Mm.
Syrian government chose was oppressive and definitely not fun in any way. But still were
Yeah.
aspects of being home that were pretty incredible. But then I left and I did not return to live there until my late 30s. And that's when we built the banking sector. And that was transformative. And then there was a completely different country, right? It was incredibly generous. You can go, there were you can go to the opera house twice a day. There were two operas every day at the op, and then you can
Wow.
go and have a shisha in the old city, so it's like a contrast of East and West that worked in a very profound way. And then the Civil War happened, and all of that obviously changed. But this is kind of a
Yeah.
problem with the Middle East. There's always a war around the corner, and it's been like this for forever, right? And we could continue
Mm.
to hope that there will be a war that will kind of bring about peace, and we don't know when that will happen.
Mm. A war around the corner. That's an interesting way. I mean, as someone that spent so much time in the Middle East, it was that did that kind of develop something in you where you were always like waiting for something around the corner?
100%. We can't help it because when we returned from Paris,
Hmm.
I was like 7 years old, and that's when the 1973 Yom Kippur War started. And I remember, we were painting our the glass windows dark so that the planes can't see us when we turn on the lights. We filled the bathtub with water
Wow.
just in case power gets cut
Mm.
off or there was a fire. We would open the windows slightly so that when there is an attack, the windows don't break, but they actually open up. And we would congregate in the middle of the
Mm.
house and tell stories. And there's something that happens when we experience something like this. you begin to think that this is kind of normal, that it's such a
Mm,
extraordinary thing to expect that this will happen again. Uh,
sure.
so yeah, you end up becoming more aware of your surroundings, and definitely working towards understanding what is your risk level. And this is where, you
Mm,
know, for me at least, kind of trying to figure out and understand the difference between danger and fear is really critical, because if we just let fear run our lives, I don't think we'll be in survival mode all the time. So really understanding when something is truly dangerous versus something that I'm just purely afraid of and may not be as dangerous.
mm. Well, you opened the door, so I'll ask, what was something that maybe you were afraid of that wasn't dangerous?
There's so much actually. Especially after. So I was in Syria when the civil war happened, and it was brutal. I mean, I ran a
Mm,
bank that was 4% of GDP, and my chief accountant just disappeared, and spent 20 years, and we don't know where he is. Um, I've seen killings, I mean, just like torture, the works, and it's just like really, really horrible. So when I go somewhere else after I left after the Civil War, I would go anywhere. If I hear a bang, think that it's a bomb, right?
oh,
It's like,
mhm,
I said, you gotta wise up. You can't live your life kind of thinking that any time you hear a bang, this is something more dangerous than what it really is. So there is a kind of unlearning that was required of me. So I
mm,
can unlearn some of the things that I got programmed to believe in earlier.
sure, right, and, you know, then now New York, right? Like, I mean, that's a
It bangs all over the place, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What are some of the things that either you unlearned or learned in your time, here in the States and as an
Yeah.
American that maybe, our listeners might benefit from hearing from?
Yeah. I love how we enjoy our individual liberties. I really do. I cherish it.
Mm,
And I remember I was on a flight a couple of years ago, and the flight was delayed because somebody just decided at the last minute that they did not like their seat and they wanted to be off the flight, right? And the whole flight was delayed, and the person was like, I just don't want to be here, and they left, and they unloaded them and unloaded their baggage and stuff, and everybody was like really upset, and I was like, wow, this is wonderful. Right? It feels like this is probably the only place that I've lived in where that's something like this can happen. Even Europe, with all of, I mean, you have obviously old Scandinavia is very, liberal and democratic, and you have other parts of the world that are also very democratic. You don't have that level of individualism in it. Um, and that kind of idea that individuals really, really matter. Whether you're crossing the
mm.
street and it says "do not walk" and you still have the right of way for some strange reason, or whether you are able to kind of leave the plane like almost in mid-flight.
Mhm.
It just is not only fascinating. I think there is an element of beauty to it that I did not enjoy when I did not have when I was growing up. I went to an American high school in Pakistan. That's where I finished my last two high school years. And I remember
Mhm.
talking to my 11th grade teacher, and he was basically he had one request of me when I was doing the first pop quiz. I went to a French school before that, so I'm used to kind of like remembering everything and writing down the answer as close to the way that the book had written it. And the professor was saying,
Sure.
no, that's not what I want. I want you to think. So this idea
Mm,
of challenging the individual to think in their own way, the idea that there is no
mm.
wrong answer. And I mean, I went to Harvard. I mean, you go into a classroom with a bunch of very intelligent people and you're talking about something, and there's like, no matter how it sounds like this idea is coming out of left field, there is no wrong answer. It's not like there isn't the wrong answer, but this is a laughable answer. No, no, there really is no wrong answer because I care about the
Mm,
way you're doing things, the way you're thinking about it, and I want to understand why is it that you're saying that. So I love,
mm. So uh, I'm curious, thinking
yeah,
differently,
yeah,
right? Um, I mean, you're blowing my mind now to hear someone come in and talk about these individual liberties as beautiful when we,
yeah.
myself, take them for granted, and someone jaywalking or someone getting off the plane is just a nuisance. You know, um, that's fascinating, and you know, think thinking differently now, right? With the explosion of technology, it seems like thinking differently is rarer, right? Um, I'm curious how you continue to keep your thinking differently alive.
Yeah, I'm questioning the premise. I'm not 100% sure that thinking differently is actually rarer. And I'll tell you why
Mm,
I'm pushing back a little bit on this.
yeah.
Um, it's actually mostly the traditional way of thinking that is becoming rarer. So when you look at, I'm in New York, the number of
Hmm.
kids, mine until a while ago, and my friends' kids who are looking for jobs, who are like extremely promising young men and women, who are unable to find the right
Hmm.
job is just staggering. Staggering. And it's
Mm,
because they're trying to do
yeah.
something in a very traditional way. They went to a traditional school, they went
Ah,
to university. They did what the doctor ordered, right? The prescription is you go to school, you do your 4 years, you come out, it's a good
right.
school, you're a good person,
Right.
we'll give you a job. That's a traditional way. The people who are thinking differently are the ones that are dropping out, starting their own business, starting a podcast, doing a stand up, right? Doing
Yeah.
things that are untraditional. And these are the ones that I think
Mm,
are able to gamify the system and kind of like excel. I think I would probably attach a much higher value on people thinking differently today than in the past. I think we've largely
yeah.
been traditional, and now we're getting disrupted, right? I mean, now we're looking at how the world
Sure.
functions, and it functions in a very unpredictable way. And even
Yeah.
with AI, when you're looking at, the difference between your Grok or your Chat GPT, right? I mean, the Grok, you have all of these different modes in which the AI can
Yeah.
think and talk to you versus the Chat GPT kind of like, very specific way of discussing things. I think,
Mm,
I think people are thinking differently. Um, and
mm,
and there's a lot of diversity of thought. What bothers me actually is a different question is the fact that we're not having these, difficult conversations together, right?
mm,
There kind
mm,
of divisiveness that seems to
yeah.
predicate everything that we're looking at, whether it's politics or whether it's religion or whether it's ethics, right? Whether it's anything that's normative, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And we're really very good
Yeah.
at launching these quick attacks on in social media, which are like 24 words or whatever, but we're unable to have this back and forth crucial conversation to really understand another.
I love your answer to that. And, you know, that's thinking differently in a nutshell. That's what I get for asking a thinking differently question is you help me think differently. So, you know, when I was referring to thinking differently, I was referring to exactly what you just talked about people just choose
Right.
a side and then they
Right.
tranche in. You took a timeline approach and you're like, tradition is
Mhm.
failing and thinking differently. And that totally makes sense. Now, I'm curious, one of your careers was in
Mhm.
banking, which, if you talk about
Right.
traditions, I mean, that's a traditional industry, right? Like, what was thinking differently like in that career of
Yeah,
yours?
absolutely. So, I was involved in kind of writing the banking law for Syria when I worked for the World Bank. So we wrote the banking law for Syria,
Wow.
and the government passed it with very few comments, which was like very uplifting and laudable. I mean, they trusted our team, so they kind of, said, "This is what you want to do. It makes sense," and they passed it. And then the World Bank invested in the first private sector bank with Bank of Syria and overseas, and I was on its board. So I was the guy in charge of that transaction.
Wow.
And then I was headhunted to become a shareholder and start a fourth bank, which became very quickly the top bank. But I was confronted with this idea as I'm starting this bank as to what does it mean to have a bank in Syria? I had so many ideas, I really thought that, I knew what kind of a bank would work.
Hmm.
And the truth of the matter is um, when you're dealing with a marketplace and you want to think differently, you want to understand what your clients really want. So
Mm.
we interviewed so many different people. We did all of these studies, and we interviewed people in different sectors in different parts of Syria, and we asked all of them what kind of a bank do they want. The bank that they spoke about had nothing to do with my vision.
Uh-huh.
So I
Uh-huh.
could either be honest to
And
my vision and say, "Hey guys, this is the bank that you're going to have," or I'm going to say, like, let's give the people what they want, and it's very different. So I was thinking of a very traditional bank that kind of reflects all of the solid credentials of banking that is steeped in tradition, that has personal relationships at its core. And what they wanted was a very modern institution, lots of
mm,
tech, a lot of, a lot of technology in the background and in the foreground. They wanted very specific way of interacting with it. They wanted to know that they are being seen sequentially according to who comes first. They don't want to be received according to who knows whom, who the relationship. So they were really focused on automation, and that's what we gave them.
mm,
So I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit of what Simon Sinek says in his Golden Circle. When we end up, biology is the major constituent of who you end up doing business with or you end up hanging out with. It's this idea that you recognize
mm.
that you want to trust this person or not. And that's what we tried to build. We tried to build a bank that people could trust. And that's why we became so big so quickly.
Yeah. And, if you had to kind of explain how big you got, how would you do that for our listeners?
Yeah, I don't have a good comparator, but we became 4% of GDP in 5 years.
Wow.
So yeah, and I
Hmm.
mean, it's pretty big, and over a very
Yeah.
short period of time. Um, and
Uh-huh.
it was like, but it
Yeah.
was a time of growth, so it wasn't like,
Yeah.
and at the same time, I was tapped to help start the stock exchange. So I was the deputy chairman of the Damascus Securities Exchange, and we started Syria's first stock exchange. Um, and it was the best performing stock exchange in the world in its first year because of how low valuations were when we first went in. But yeah, I mean, it was a time for growth. It was time for hope. It was a time for a lot of like positive things happening at the same time.
Mm. I mean, it sounds like your leadership and your ability to seek feedback goes hand in hand with the sentiment of the time of growth and hope. I'm curious, you know, how do we kind of break out of this kind of traditional trap that we're in with all this disruption, leveraging that same kind of idea of, being open to feedback? What do you
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about
yeah.
that?
It's in the word that you said. By the way, at that stage, I was really very young. I didn't see myself at all, kind of having all of these leadership characteristics. I did see, however, I was very
Mm,
curious. Uh,
okay.
Curiosity, I think, is incredible. It truly is like, it's a gift that continues to give because I didn't know exactly how things would turn out. I didn't know what people wanted, right? And the easiest thing is to say, "Oh, I know," or "Let me try," or "I got it," or it's like, no, be curious
Yeah.
about what they want. Be curious about what the other side is thinking. Um, you and I are different in the way that we were raised. From a different generation,
Mm,
right? We have completely different
mhm,
backgrounds. But if I had your identical life experience, I would think the way you do. So let me find out what that
right.
is. What is that like? What is it like to be you? And let's have a conversation
Mm,
about what it's like to be you from a place of curiosity,
mhm.
right? So you can't be there's got to be zero judgment in any of this, and true curiosity as to how does this function, and who is this person, and why do they believe what they believe, right? Whatever that is.
Mm. Um, what is the relationship between judgment and
Yeah.
curiosity? Can they coexist? Must they not? What's that dynamic like?
It's a fabulous question. So, judgment, for me is what is it that I think I can do and I cannot do? It's an internal question that
Mm,
relates to my ethics, right? And my abilities.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I can't be a judge of other people's actions. I can try understand how is it that they function? Why is it they got there? Right? But I don't want to be put in a position where I judge them. This is not right
Yeah.
for me. However, if you're a Supreme Court judge, that's what you're entrusted with. You're taking on responsibility of making a decision on behalf of other people, right?
Yeah.
So that's completely fine.
Right.
And I'm happy to contribute to that, right? And contribute to the debate. But I don't want to be kind of like single-handedly held like I'm judging someone based on their belief system. And, if I had his experience or her experience, I would have the same identical belief system. If I had their parents, their
Right.
grandparents, and their brothers and their sisters, and I was born in the same place and had to go through the same ordeal and life experience they had, I would be them. So who am I to judge?
Yeah. Who am I? Judge. I'm working on a thesis that the closer you get to
Yeah.
certainty, the closer you get to your own destruction. And the opposite of certainty is curiosity. And the book that I'm working on about this thesis is the working title is I don't know shit. How curious people are smarter, more interesting, and harder to fool. What do you think? I mean, just I'm curious, you know, for me, what do you think about
I
that?
think it's amazing. Um, First of all, I love how you're coming to it as always from a place of humor as well, right? You come to the difficult kind of high tension places from a place where it's calm and you're taking the gloves off. Let's have fun with it. I love
Right.
that part. I wish I had more of that in me. But you're absolutely, I think you've nailed it. Um, there is no other way than curiosity to arrive at this. I don't think there is, honestly. And we have to come into this um, with zero judgment and try and understand what is happening there. So no,
Mm.
I can't wait to read the book. When will it be out?
It's going to come out this fall, but don't worry, you're going to get a pre-release, and you're going to help me make it awesome
Sure.
because I'm curious what you think. But right
Mm.
now, I'm curious about what you're curious about.
Oh God, how much time do you have?
We got plenty of time.
Thanks so much. So my interests are varied, and I spend a lot of time in my head. But at the same time, the time I spend in my head is constructive. Sounds a little bit inaccurate and somewhat egotistical.
Mm,
It's not constructive, but it's like targeted, right? So I do spend a lot of time in my
sure.
head with targeted things. So I think a lot about science. I think a lot about astronomy. I think a lot about
Mm,
philosophy. I think a lot about current affairs
mm,
and politics. I think about technology and AI. And I think a lot about psychology because I'm a coach and I love, um, I can't tell you how much I love this job. So I just love to think about my coaching clients. I love to think about their, their challenges and how they're showing up for them and how I can,
mm,
be their thinking partner. I also spend a lot of time on boards of companies, and I do a bunch of things. A lot of it is in the internal audit side, which I really also love, and it's very different than the other types of skill sets, which because it's all deals with how is the company being run, right? Is it doing what it says it's,
right.
and that's kind of the touch point between culture and process. I really love that. And I
Mm,
spent time on
mm,
remuneration committees and all of this. And I was recently asked to get back on the stock exchange of Damascus Securities Exchange board. So I'm doing that. I'm back on the board trying to help them come out of all of this, dark tunnel that they've been in since the Civil War started. And I'm turning
mm,
around another bank in Syria, a much smaller bank, which has a lot of issues, and I'm trying to turn it around. So I spend a lot of time in my head thinking about these things. I also think about, my
mm,
family members, my wife, my kids, and what they're going through. So yeah, I spend a lot of time in my head, and I'm curious about all of these things. And in most, the thing that I look at is not always solution driven, right? Um, which is, I think, so when we're driving purely for solutions, we put our curiosity aside.
mhm,
I like to
mm,
gamify and I like to kind of reverse
mhm,
engineer and see where things are likely to come out for everybody I work with. But at the same time, I don't want to judge it. I want to be completely open to whatever direction it takes. So I approach it from a place
yeah.
of curiosity. What is my daughter going through and how is she going to navigate this and so on.
Um, okay. We unfortunately we only have time for a couple more questions, but I have to ask
Yeah,
this
go
one.
ahead.
As a coach, as someone who's asked to be on boards to advise, going back to kind of the red thread in this
Yeah.
conversation of
Yeah.
unlearning and how we're growing up and our
Yeah.
perspective. What is that process like of separating yourself when it comes to advising and coaching somebody else? Like, how do you do
Yeah.
that without inserting your own point of view? Or do you?
Yeah, I
You
don't
know,
insert my point of
curious.
view. You're spot on. And
Hmm.
initially, it was really, really hard because
Mm,
most of my professional life, I was like a CEO, right? So, doing
yeah,
and, alphaing, right? Everything is alpha, alpha, alpha that.
right.
And then as a coach, you're not CEOing anything. So, so the first part, the initial part was hard, and I tried to figure out what's the payoff for me,
Mm,
and it actually became so easy. Um,
mm,
because when I recognize that each one of these people, not only my clients, also, the CEOs I work with on boards, as well as my family members, all of these have
mm,
agency. I
mm,
have to take that agency and hold space for it. That's like that for me kind of like overcomes everything else. It's much stronger than any drive I have for, you know, recognition or ego or anything like that, because it's really about them.
mm,
And for me, there is
mm,
another element. When I find that people around me are feel comfortable enough to self-disclose part of themselves that they don't usually disclose it to others. For me, I feel like I've gotten the best reward in life. So it's just so powerful that makes me like, yeah, this is great. Uh, so
Yeah.
definitely no insertion of self into any of this. It's actually more of I'm giving up part of myself for this in a way is
Mm.
very fulfilling.
Mm. They have agency and hold space for it. So you've given so much advice already, but I have to ask if there was one piece of advice that you could give to our listeners to help them live more extraordinary today, what would it be?
The thing that people often forget is that they're in charge. We go through our lives often thinking that somebody else is in charge of it, right? And part of this
Right.
happens at childhood, right? When, somebody's, they was in charge of
Hmm.
my life for many, many years. But the reality is that they're in charge. And when we
Mm.
claim that voice, when we claim that agency, we know that this is ours, it's not anybody else's. And it
Mm.
tallies very nicely with this individualism that we spoke about earlier, right? Not only is it mine, and not only am I not in, not only am I the only one in charge, it's also I have the right to do it any way I want, right?
Yeah.
So that combination
Hmm.
is just tremendous, and it's basically Excalibur waiting to be claimed, and most walking
Yeah.
next to it, and they're not even trying, right? Pick it up, pick up the sword, take the journey. Um, it's just there's so much potential out there. But we got to get over this idea that, do we have agency? Do we have claim? And do we have the power to do it? I would argue that we do. The only case where we may not is when we're in complete survival mode, right? And for that, there are people around who can help, right? We're
Hmm.
not alone.
Hmm.
When we are in survival mode, we got to
Hmm.
understand that we're not alone. And when we're past survival mode, we got to understand that we're in charge.
Mm. Man. Well, there you have it, listeners. You're in charge. Bassel Hamwi says so. You can read more about Bassel at joinextraordinary.com. That's JOINEXTRAORDINARY.com and at Join Extraordinary on all of our socials. I'm Forbes Shannon. Bassel, thank you so much.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much for inviting me.